Fear ends the moment God is remembered as present reality, not as an idea, not as a belief to be reached later, but as the living fact of this moment. Fear survives only where God is imagined as distant. When God is recognized as here, now, and within, fear has no ground on which to stand. Fear is not power, it is absence. It is the absence of awareness. It is what fills the mind when attention drifts away from the source of life. Fear does not come from events, circumstances, or uncertainty. It arises when consciousness forgets where it is anchored. The moment that anchor is restored, fear loosens and fades, not by force, but by truth. God is not waiting at the end of improvement. God is not hidden behind effort or discipline. God is present before thought begins. This presence is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is steady, quiet, and absolute. When awareness settles into this presence, the nervous urgency of fear dissolves. The mind stops bracing for impact. The soul remembers it has never been alone. Fear depends on time. It feeds on the future and scavenges the past. It projects danger forward and regret backward. But God is never found in either direction. God is always now. The present moment is not neutral ground. It is sacred ground. It is the only place where reality is alive. When attention rests here, fear cannot maintain its narrative. Fear speaks in images. It paints scenes of loss, failure, illness, abandonment, and death. These images feel convincing because they borrow emotional energy, but they are shadows, not substance. A shadow disappears when light is introduced. Truth does not argue with fear. Truth outshines it. The light of present awareness is enough. God as present reality is not a theological position. It is an experiential fact. It is the quiet knowing that life is not hostile. It is the deep certainty that existence is not an accident. It is the felt sense that something intelligent, loving, and orderly is sustaining every breath without effort. When this is remembered, fear loses its urgency. The mind was not designed to live in constant alert. It was designed to be a channel of awareness. Fear turns the mind into a surveillance system, scanning for threats, rehearsing outcomes, defending against imagined futures. Presence restores the mind to its original function. Awareness replaces vigilance. Trust replaces tension. Fear claims to protect, but it never does. It exhausts the body and narrows perception. It contracts the breath and fragments attention. It convinces consciousness that survival depends on control. Presence reveals the opposite. Life does not require control. It requires alignment. When awareness aligns with the present reality of God, effort softens and clarity returns. God as present reality does not remove challenges. It removes the illusion of isolation. Circumstances may still change, but they no longer dominate identity. Events lose the power to define worth or safety. The inner reference point shifts from conditions to consciousness. From reaction to recognition, fear cannot coexist with this recognition. Not because fear is suppressed, but because it becomes unnecessary. A mind that knows it is held does not panic. A soul that remembers its source does not brace for disaster. Awareness anchored in presence does not imagine abandonment. This remembrance is simple, but it is not casual. It requires attention, not strained attention, but sincere attention. Attention that withdraws from mental noise and rests in being. Attention that stops chasing explanations and settles into existence itself. In that settling, certainty emerges. The certainty is not emotional excitement. It is calm. It is steady. It does not fluctuate with news or opinion. It does not need reinforcement. It is self-sustaining because it is grounded in reality, not imagination. This certainty is the natural state of consciousness aligned with God. Fear insists that something must be done before peace is possible. Presence reveals that peace is available before anything is resolved. Resolution follows peace, not the other way around. When peace is established at the center, the outer situation rearranges accordingly. Remembering God as present reality is not a mental exercise. It is a shift in identity. Identity moves from the anxious thinker to the aware presence behind thought, from the frightened observer to the witnessing consciousness. This shift is subtle but decisive. Once it occurs, fear no longer governs behavior. Life begins to feel supported rather than opposed. Decisions arise from clarity instead of urgency. Action becomes measured rather than reactive. Silence gains authority. The nervous system relaxes because it no longer carries the burden of protecting existence. Fear has no independent existence. It is sustained only by attention. When attention is reclaimed by presence, fear starves. It does not need to be confronted. It simply fades from lack of reinforcement. Truth occupies the space fear once held. This remembrance is not a one-time event. It is a living orientation. Each moment offers the same invitation. Attention can drift outward into speculation, or it can return inward to presence. Each return strengthens stability. Each return reinforces trust. The present moment is never dangerous. It may contain intensity, but it does not contain threat. Threat exists only in imagined futures. Regret exists only in remembered pasts. Presence contains neither. Presence contains life as it is, unopposed and intact. God is not added to the present. God is the present. This is the realization that ends fear at its root. When this is seen, the search for safety ends. Safety is recognized as intrinsic. Protection is no longer requested. It is acknowledged. The mind may still produce fearful thoughts. Habits do not vanish instantly, but those thoughts lose authority. They are seen as weather, not climate. They pass without defining reality. Awareness remains steady beneath them. This steadiness is not withdrawal from life. It is full engagement without distortion. It allows participation without panic. It allows movement without strain. It allows love without fear of loss. It restores balance between action and rest. As awareness stabilizes in present reality, trust becomes natural. Trust does not need to be cultivated. It emerges as a byproduct of recognition. When God is known as here, trust is unavoidable. Doubt loses its foundation. Fear ends not through struggle, but through remembrance, not through resistance, but through recognition, not through escape, but through arrival. Arrival into the present, arrival into truth, arrival into the quiet certainty that life is held. Rest here. Let awareness settle. Nothing needs to be fixed. Nothing needs to be avoided. The present is sufficient. God is here. And where God is remembered, fear has already ended. Fear has a single spiritual root. The belief in separation, every form of fear, no matter how complex or refined it appears, grows from this one illusion, the illusion that life is divided, that you exist apart from the source that created you, that you stand alone in an indifferent world. When this belief takes hold, fear becomes inevitable. Separation is not an experience. It is an interpretation. It is not something that actually happens. It is something the mind assumes when awareness loses contact with truth. The soul was never created separate from God. It was created within life, sustained by life, and inseparable from its origin. Fear begins the moment this fact is forgotten. The mind, when it forgets unity, begins to construct a false identity. This identity sees itself as fragile, temporary, and exposed. It measures itself against circumstances. It depends on outcomes. It calculates risk. From this standpoint, fear seems reasonable. But reason built on a false premise produces distorted conclusions. Fear does not prove danger. It reveals misalignment. It is not evidence that the world is unsafe. It is a signal that consciousness has drifted from its center. The center is unity. The center is belonging. The center is the unbroken relationship between life and its expression. Separation creates the sense of exile. Exile from safety. Exile from guidance. Exile from love. Once this sense takes root, the mind looks outward for security. It searches for protection in conditions, people, systems, and control. These substitutes never satisfy because they cannot replace what was never truly lost. The illusion of separation gives rise to the ego. The ego is not evil. It is a coping mechanism. It forms when the mind believes it must survive alone. It builds defenses. It anticipates threat. It fears loss because it believes it has something to lose. It fears death because it believes life is temporary. It fears failure because it believes worth must be earned. The ego thrives on fear because fear confirms its worldview. Fear keeps attention focused on form, time, and limitation. It reinforces the belief that life is a struggle, that safety is conditional, that love must be negotiated. This cycle continues until awareness interrupts it. Separation also fractures time. The mind that feels disconnected lives either ahead of itself or behind itself. It projects into the future to secure safety or retreats into the past to explain pain. In both cases, it abandons the present, and the present is the only place where unity is experienced. God is not distant. Distance exists only in thought. God is not absent. Absence is a mental conclusion, not a spiritual fact. The belief in separation is sustained by repetition, not by truth. It is learned, reinforced, and normalized. But it is never real. Fear intensifies when the mind identifies with the body as its source. The body becomes the limit of existence. Vulnerability feels absolute. Aging becomes a threat. Illness becomes a sentence. Death becomes annihilation. These fears collapse when identity returns to spirit. Spirit is not bound by form. It expresses through form. When this is remembered, fear loses its authority. Events no longer threaten identity. Loss no longer defines worth. Change no longer implies danger. Life is recognized as continuous, not fragile. The illusion of separation also distorts relationships. Others appear as competitors, threats, or sources of validation. Fear of rejection, abandonment, and judgment arise from the belief that love comes from outside. When unity is restored, relationships shift from survival strategies to shared expression. Nothing needs to be added to restore unity. Nothing was ever removed. Unity is remembered, not achieved. It is revealed when attention turns inward and rests in being rather than thinking. In that resting, the sense of exile dissolves. Fear resists this remembrance because fear depends on distance. Distance between self and God. Distance between self and others. Distance between now and safety. When distance collapses, fear collapses with it. Separation also fuels the belief in personal burden. The idea that everything depends on individual effort, that mistakes are fatal. That failure defines identity. Unity restores cooperation with life. Guidance becomes available. Support is recognized as constant. The mind does not need to destroy the ego. It needs to outgrow it. The ego dissolves naturally when the belief that created it is corrected. When unity is remembered, the ego has no function. Fear has no role. Defense becomes unnecessary. Correction does not happen through argument. It happens through recognition. Recognition that you have never been outside life. Recognition that you have never been unprotected. Recognition that existence itself is intelligent and benevolent. Fear often appears loud because separation feels convincing, but conviction does not equal truth. Habitual belief does not equal reality. The truth of unity is quiet, steady, and always present beneath mental noise. This truth does not demand belief. It invites attention. When attention rests in awareness rather than story, unity becomes obvious. The sense of being held replaces the urge to hold everything together. Fear weakens as this awareness stabilizes, not because circumstances change, but because interpretation changes. Life is no longer viewed from the position of exile, but from belonging. Belonging is the end of fear, not belonging to an idea, a group, or a belief system, but belonging to life itself, belonging to the source that sustains every moment effortlessly. Separation was never real. It was assumed, and what is assumed can be released. When the assumption falls away, fear has nothing left to support it. Rest here. The sense of unity does not need proof. It reveals itself as peace, as grounding, As quiet confidence, the belief in separation fades, and with it, the root of fear loosens. Life does not stand against you. Life expresses as you. When this is remembered, fear no longer defines perception. Awareness returns home. And in that return, the illusion dissolves. Fear is not a force. It is a lapse in memory. It appears when consciousness forgets what it is rooted in. Fear is forgetfulness. Faith is remembrance. This is not poetry. It is a precise spiritual law. When truth is remembered, fear loses its structure. When truth is forgotten, fear fills the gap. Nothing real has ever threatened your existence. What feels like danger arises when awareness disconnects from its source and begins to identify with appearances. The moment attention drifts from what is eternal to what is temporary, uncertainty enters. Fear is born in that shift. It is not sent by life. It is generated by forgetting life. Faith is often misunderstood as belief in something unseen. In reality, faith is recognition of what has always been present. Faith is not effort. It is alignment. It is the natural state of a mind that remembers where it belongs. When remembrance is active, fear cannot maintain coherence. Forgetfulness creates darkness, not because light disappears, but because awareness turns away from it. Darkness is not an entity. It is absence. Fear functions in the same way. It has no substance of its own. It occupies the space left when truth is ignored. Every fear tells a story of being alone, a story of being unprotected, a story of being at risk in a hostile world. These stories feel real because they repeat, but repetition does not make something true. It only makes it familiar. Fear thrives on familiarity. Faith interrupts this cycle by restoring memory. Memory not of events, but of essence. Memory that life is intelligent. Memory that existence is held. Memory that nothing essential can be lost. When this memory returns, fear weakens without resistance. The mind forgets easily because it is trained to focus outward. It watches circumstances, news, outcomes, and opinions. It scans for signals of safety or threat. In doing so, it neglects the inner reference point. That neglect is forgetfulness. Fear fills the resulting vacuum. Faith does not deny appearances. It places them in proper context. Appearances change. Truth does not. Faith remembers this difference. Fear confuses them. Fear treats temporary conditions as ultimate reality. Faith recognizes them as passing expressions. Forgetfulness also fragments identity. Awareness narrows and begins to define itself by roles, bodies, histories, and projections. The more fragmented identity becomes, the more fear multiplies. Each fragment feels exposed. Each fragment seeks protection. Faith restores wholeness. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means integration. It means awareness no longer fights itself. When awareness remembers its unity, internal conflict softens. The need to defend diminishes. Peace becomes available. Fear is convincing because it speaks the language of urgency. It demands attention. It insists that something must be fixed immediately. Faith speaks quietly. It does not compete. It waits. When attention turns toward it, clarity emerges. Remembrance is not a dramatic event. It is subtle. It feels like coming home, like settling into something familiar that was never truly lost. This familiarity carries authority. It does not argue with fear. It outgrows it. Forgetfulness also distorts time. The mind leaves the present and lives in imagined futures or unresolved pasts. Fear depends on this displacement. Faith restores presence. Presence restores memory. In presence, fear has no environment. The present moment is not dangerous. It is complete. Fear projects beyond it. Faith anchors within it. This anchoring is remembrance in action. It is not passive. It is grounded. Faith is not blind trust. It is clear seeing. It sees that life has been sustaining you long before fear began narrating threats. It sees continuity where fear predicts collapse. It sees order where fear anticipates chaos. Forgetfulness leads to effort. Constant effort to manage outcomes. to control variables. To anticipate problems, faith leads to cooperation, cooperation with intelligence already at work. This cooperation feels like ease. Fear believes safety must be earned. Faith remembers safety is inherent. Fear believes worth is conditional. Faith remembers worth is given. Fear believes love must be secured. Faith remembers love is the source. Remembrance does not remove responsibility. It removes burden. Action still happens, but it flows from clarity instead of panic. Decisions arise from insight instead of pressure. Movement becomes purposeful instead of reactive. Fear resists remembrance because remembrance dissolves its authority. Fear depends on confusion. Faith depends on clarity. When clarity increases, fear recedes naturally. Forgetfulness often masquerades as realism. It calls faith naive. It claims preparation requires anxiety. But anxiety has never prepared anything. It only exhausts. Faith prepares by aligning perception with truth. Faith does not promise outcomes. It promises presence. Presence is enough because it connects awareness to guidance. Guidance replaces guesswork. Confidence replaces dread. Remembrance is strengthened through attention. Attention to breath. Attention to stillness. Attention to the quiet sense of being alive. These are not techniques. They are invitations back to truth. Each return to remembrance weakens fear's hold. Not all at once, but steadily. Faith becomes familiar. Fear becomes foreign. The balance shifts. You are not required to eliminate fear. You are invited to remember. Remember what you are rooted in. Remember what sustains you. Remember what has never failed. Forgetfulness may still visit. Old habits do not vanish instantly, but remembrance becomes quicker. Recovery becomes easier. Faith becomes the default. Faith is not something you create. It is something you uncover. It was present before fear. It remains beneath fear. When remembered, it restores order. Fear dissolves when it is no longer believed. Belief fades when memory returns. Memory returns when attention rests in truth rather than story. Rest in this. Nothing needs to be proven. Nothing needs to be forced. Faith is not distant. It is the natural response of awareness aligned with reality. As remembrance deepens, fear loosens, the mind becomes quieter, the body relaxes, trust stabilizes, not because life has changed, but because perception has returned to truth. Faith is remembrance, and remembrance is the end of fear. Fear is not the absence of faith. Fear is faith pointed in the wrong direction. The same inner power that builds, heals, and uplifts is at work when fear imagines loss, danger, and collapse. Nothing new is added. Nothing is missing. The creative law remains the same. Only the direction changes. Every sustained thought carries energy. Every repeated idea gathers momentum. The mind is not passive. It is generative. It impresses patterns upon experience according to what it consistently holds as true. Faith is the capacity to trust this process and align it with truth. Fear is the same capacity misused, aimed toward appearances instead of reality. The creative law does not judge. It does not select based on intention or morality. It responds to coherence and intensity. What is believed with feeling becomes formative. When fear dominates attention, it is not withholding faith. It is exercising it unconsciously. Fear is belief invested in what is false. This is why fear feels powerful. It feels powerful because belief is powerful. Fear borrows its force from the very principle meant to serve life. When belief is placed in lack, lack appears. When belief is placed in danger, danger feels near. The law obeys direction, not desire. Many attempt to pray while fearing. Words ask for safety while the heart rehearses disaster. This inner contradiction weakens clarity. The law responds to the deeper signal, not the spoken request. Faith cannot operate in two directions at once. When fear occupies the center, prayer becomes echo rather than alignment. Fear does not create because the universe is cruel. It creates because the law is faithful. The law does not resist belief. It cooperates with it. This cooperation is impartial. It magnifies whatever is held with conviction. Fear feels punished only because it experiences the mirror of its own direction. Belief is always active. Even doubt is belief placed in uncertainty. Even worry is belief placed in threat. Even anticipation of failure is belief invested in limitation. The mind cannot stop believing. It can only choose where belief rests. The reversal begins with recognition. Fear is not a warning from truth. It is a signal of misdirected belief. It indicates that faith has been assigned to a false image. This recognition is not condemnation. It is liberation. What is misdirected can be redirected. Redirection does not require force. It requires clarity. Clarity withdraws energy from false images and returns it to truth. Attention is the lever. Where attention goes, belief follows. When attention shifts from imagined outcomes to present reality, fear weakens. Fear thrives on images. It paints scenes of catastrophe and rehearses them until they feel inevitable. These images gain power through repetition and emotion. The creative law responds to the image charged with feeling, not to rational correction. To reverse fear, the image must be replaced. Replacement is not denial. It is selection. The mind is always selecting images. Either it accepts those generated by fear, or it chooses those aligned with truth. Images of stability, guidance, sufficiency, and order are not fantasies. They reflect spiritual reality. Faith aligned with truth does not strain. It settles. It does not shout. It clarifies. When belief returns to what is eternal, the creative process reorganizes. Experience follows perception. The outer responds to the inner. Fear claims realism. It calls itself preparation. It insists that imagining the worst prevents surprise. This is a misunderstanding of the law. Imagining the worst trains the mind to expect it. Expectation is belief in motion. Belief in motion becomes experience. True preparedness is alignment, not anxiety. Alignment places belief in intelligence already at work. It trusts guidance to appear as needed. It does not require forecasting disaster to feel ready. Fear often disguises itself as responsibility. It suggests that vigilance proves care. In reality, vigilance exhausts perception. It narrows awareness until only threat remains visible. Faith broadens perception until solutions become apparent. The creative law amplifies what is central. What is central becomes habitual. Habit shapes character. Character shapes experience. Fear at the center produces contraction. Faith at the center produces expansion. Expansion does not mean excess. It means openness. It means receptivity to guidance. It means willingness to receive what is already offered. Fear closes the channel by insisting on control. Faith opens the channel by allowing cooperation. Many believe they must eliminate fear before faith can function. This reverses the order. Faith does not wait for fear to disappear. Faith replaces fear by taking its place. When belief is reassigned, fear loses its role. The law responds immediately to redirection, not always visibly, but internally. Tension softens, breath deepens, perspective widens. These are signs of realignment. From this state, outer changes become possible. Fear does not need to be feared. Fear is not an enemy. It is misused belief asking for correction. When seen this way, resistance ends. Understanding begins. Correction happens moment by moment. Each time attention returns to what is real, belief reorients. Each time imagination is guided toward truth, the law follows. Consistency matters more than intensity. Gentle persistence reshapes patterns. Faith aligned with truth does not guarantee specific outcomes. It guarantees coherence. Coherence allows life to unfold intelligently. Fear demands certainty. Faith rests in sufficiency. The mind learns through experience. When belief is placed in truth and peace follows, confidence grows. Fear loses credibility. Faith becomes familiar. Trust stabilizes. Inverted faith relies on images that collapse under presence. When awareness remains present, images lose momentum. The law shifts response accordingly. Experience reorganizes without struggle. The creative law is not something to master. It is something to respect. Respect means conscious use. Conscious use means alignment with truth. Alignment restores harmony. Fear misuses the law by placing belief in shadows. Faith uses the law by placing belief in substance. Substance is not material. It is spiritual reality. It is order, intelligence, and love expressing as life. When belief returns to this foundation, fear no longer commands imagination. The law responds differently. Experience follows suit. Rest in this understanding. No battle is required, only direction. When belief turns toward truth, the creative law resumes its natural function, and fear, having lost its misuse of power, releases its grip. Thought is not decoration. Thought is cause, what the mind consistently holds. It impresses upon experience. This is not metaphor. It is law. The mind does not merely observe life. It participates in shaping it. And when fear governs thought, fear becomes creative. The mind creates by correspondence, not by preference. It does not ask what is wanted. It responds to what is sustained. Whatever occupies attention with feeling becomes formative. Fearful thought is not neutral. It is a directive. It instructs the creative law where to move. This is why fear feels productive. It feels like preparation. It feels like caution. But fear is a negative prayer. It is an internal declaration that says this danger is real and it has power. When that declaration is repeated, imagined, and emotionally charged, it begins to take form. Thought becomes creative when it is sustained. A fleeting idea has little effect. A repeated idea gathers force. Emotion acts as fuel. Imagination provides structure. Together, they form a cause. The law responds to cause without judgment. The mind often believes it is resisting fear while secretly feeding it. Worry rehearses outcomes. Anticipation strengthens images. Anxiety visualizes futures. Each repetition reinforces belief. Belief organizes experience. This does not mean the mind should be blamed. It means the mind must be guided. The same capacity that generates fear can generate peace. The same law that produces disorder can produce harmony. Direction is the difference. Fear creates not because life is hostile, but because consciousness is powerful. The power to imagine is the power to shape. The power to feel is the power to energize. When imagination and feeling are joined without awareness, they act automatically. Thought does not need to be logical to be effective. It needs to be vivid. It needs to be repeated. It needs to be believed. Fearful thought often meets all three conditions. This is why it appears to work. The law of thought does not respond to denial. It responds to replacement. Attempting to suppress fear keeps attention on it. Attention is nourishment. Nourishment strengthens what is fed. Withdrawal of attention weakens it. To withdraw attention is not to ignore reality. It is to stop rehearsing false futures. It is to stop granting imagination to what is not happening. The present moment does not require fear to be managed. It requires clarity to be seen. Thought creates through atmosphere. The mental atmosphere becomes the soil in which experiences grow. Fear acidifies that soil. Trust enriches it. The soil determines what takes root. Many fear that positive thought is unrealistic, but fear-based thought is not realistic either. It is speculative. It imagines outcomes without evidence. It assumes collapse without certainty. It claims wisdom while avoiding truth. The law of thought does not reward optimism. It responds to alignment. Alignment with what is real produces stability. Alignment with illusion produces instability. Fear aligns with illusion. Trust aligns with truth. What the mind fears, it creates. Not instantly, but progressively. Patterns form. Reactions repeat. Opportunities are overlooked. The mind begins to see confirmation everywhere. This is not fate. It is conditioning. Conditioning can be changed. Thought is trainable. Attention is adjustable. Imagination is selectable. The mind is not a victim of its habits. It is the source of them. Every fearful thought carries an assumption. That assumption can be examined. Does this belief reflect reality or projection? Does it arise from presence or from memory and anticipation? Awareness exposes the difference. The creative law responds to conviction. Conviction grows through repetition. Repetition grows through habit. Habit grows through unconsciousness. Conscious awareness interrupts the chain. When fear arises, the task is not to argue with it. Argument strengthens the loop. The task is to recognize it as thought, not fact. Recognition removes authority. Authority determines influence. Thought gains influence when it is believed. Belief fades when it is seen. Seeing does not require analysis. It requires presence. Presence reveals thought as movement, not truth. The law of thought is neutral. It does not favor fear or faith. It follows direction. Direction is chosen through attention. Attention is guided through awareness. When awareness returns to what is steady, thought reorganizes. The mind begins to imagine differently. Images of order replace images of chaos. Images of support replace images of threat. These images are not fantasies. They reflect spiritual reality. Faithful thought is not forced positivity. It is clarity. It sees beyond surface conditions. It recognizes intelligence at work beneath appearances. It imagines outcomes consistent with truth. Not with panic. The mind does not need to be perfect. It needs to be consistent. Occasional fear does not undo alignment. Sustained fear does. Occasional trust strengthens orientation. Sustained trust stabilizes experience. Thought follows identity. When identity is rooted in separation, fear feels logical. When identity is rooted in unity, fear feels foreign. The law responds to identity as much as to content. This is why changing thought alone is not enough. The underlying assumption must shift. The assumption that life is against you must be replaced with the recognition that life expresses as you. When this recognition takes hold, the tone of thought changes. Urgency softens. Anticipation relaxes. Imagination becomes constructive. The law responds accordingly. Thought does not create in isolation. It creates in relationship with consciousness. Consciousness determines the quality of thought. When consciousness is rooted in presence, thought serves truth. The mind fears what it forgets. It forgets what it does not attend to. Attention restores memory. Memory restores alignment. Alignment reshapes thought. This is a continuous process. The mind will wander. Habits will surface. Each return matters. Each conscious redirection weakens old patterns. The law of thought does not punish mistakes. It reflects patterns. Patterns change when guidance is accepted. Guidance appears when awareness listens. What the mind fears, it creates. What the mind understands, it releases. What the mind aligns with, it manifests. Choose alignment. Let thought become a channel, not a weapon. Let imagination serve truth. Let belief rest where it belongs. As thought settles into clarity, creation follows. Fear loses its creative role. Peace becomes formative. Life responds in kind. Fear is not overcome by force. Whatever is fought is strengthened by attention. Fear does not dissolve through resistance, argument, or suppression. It dissolves when truth takes its place. This is not avoidance. It is alignment. The mind cannot hold two centers at once. When truth is established at the center, fear loses residence. Fear survives on recognition. It asks to be named, analyzed, confronted, and justified. Each of these gives it space. Truth does not negotiate with fear. Truth replaces it, as light replaces darkness, not by struggle, but by presence. The moment light appears, darkness is no longer needed. The mind was never meant to be a battlefield. It was meant to be a sanctuary. When fear arises, the instinct is to react. Reaction feeds the pattern. Reaction tightens the loop. Replacement breaks it. Replacement is not denial. It is selection. It is choosing what is real over what is imagined. Fear is absence, not substance. It exists where clarity is missing. When clarity arrives, fear has nothing to occupy. This is why trying to remove fear directly fails. Removing an absence is impossible. Introducing what is present resolves the absence automatically. Truth is not an affirmation repeated mechanically. Truth is recognition. It is the quiet certainty that life is intelligent, that guidance is active, that support is constant. When this recognition is allowed, the nervous urgency of fear subsides. The mind cannot remain empty. If it is not filled with truth, it will be filled with noise, memories, predictions, warnings. Inherited voices rush in. Fear finds opportunity in vacancy. Replacement prevents vacancy. Truth occupies the space. Many attempt to stop fearful thoughts. This effort keeps attention on fear. Attention is nourishment. Nourishment strengthens what is fed. Replacement withdraws nourishment. When attention shifts to truth, fear weakens without resistance. Truth does not shout. It settles. It does not demand belief. It invites awareness. When awareness rests in truth, belief follows naturally. The mind relaxes because it no longer needs to defend against imagined futures. Fear speaks in scenarios. Truth speaks in presence. Fear narrates what might happen. Truth anchors what is happening. Presence interrupts imagination. Imagination loses momentum when it is not fueled. Replacement begins with noticing without judgment. Judgment adds energy. Observation removes authority. When fear is seen as thought rather than fact, it loosens. Authority shifts from emotion to awareness. The next step is introduction. Introduce truth gently, not as a command, but as a reminder. God is here. Life is holding this moment. Guidance is active. These are not slogans. They are statements of reality. Reality has power. Replacement works because the mind follows focus. Focus determines atmosphere. Atmosphere shapes response. When the atmosphere becomes calm, the body follows. Breath deepens. Muscles soften. Perception widens. Fear cannot coexist with a sense of being held. The belief that life is hostile collapses when safety is recognized as intrinsic. Safety is not an outcome. It is a condition of being aligned. Replacing fear with truth does not require perfect discipline. It requires sincerity. Each sincere return matters. Consistency outweighs intensity. Gentle persistence reshapes habit. Truth does not need to be proven. It needs to be allowed. Allowing truth means stopping the habit of rehearsing danger. It means refusing to lend imagination to collapse. It means choosing clarity when confusion tempts attention. Fear often disguises itself as caution. It claims wisdom. It argues that vigilance is necessary, but vigilance rooted in fear narrows perception. Clarity rooted in truth expands it. Expansion reveals options fear cannot see. Replacement also restores timing. Fear rushes. Truth waits. Fear demands immediate resolution. Truth unfolds naturally. When timing returns to harmony, decisions improve. Truth replaces fear through feeling as much as through thought. Feeling of calm, grounding, and trust communicates more than words. The body recognizes truth faster than the mind. When calm is felt, fear retreats. This process is not linear. Old patterns may reappear. Reappearance does not indicate failure. It indicates habit. Habits dissolve through repetition of a new orientation. Each replacement weakens the old pathway. Replacement also changes language. Inner dialogue shifts from warning to reassurance, from control to cooperation, from isolation to connection. Language shapes perception. Perception shapes experience. Fear isolates. Truth connects. Connection restores proportion. Problems shrink when viewed from wholeness. Wholeness is the natural state of consciousness aligned with reality. Truth does not promise that nothing will change. It promises that change does not threaten essence. When essence is known, fear loses leverage. Outcomes matter less. Integrity matters more. Replacing fear with truth is not passivity. It is intelligent action. Action arising from clarity is effective. Action arising from fear is reactive. Replacement improves action by improving perception. The mind learns through experience. When truth is chosen and peace follows, Confidence grows. Fear loses credibility. The cycle reverses. Trust becomes familiar. Fear becomes foreign. Replacement also simplifies. Complexity is often fear disguised as analysis. Truth simplifies because it removes unnecessary variables. When the center is clear, details organize themselves. Truth does not argue with fear. It does not refute each scenario. It stands as presence. Presence dissolves speculation. When awareness remains present, imagined futures lose authority. The body responds to replacement immediately. Breath steadies. Tension releases. These signals confirm alignment. The body becomes an ally rather than a battleground. Replacement is an act of respect for the mind. It treats the mind as trainable, not defective. It honors its creative capacity by directing it wisely. Fear loses power when it is no longer fed. Truth feeds the mind with reality. Reality sustains. Illusion exhausts. The difference becomes obvious through experience. Each moment offers the same choice. Feed fear or feed truth. Attend to absence or attend to presence. The choice is quiet but decisive. As truth becomes the default, fear becomes occasional noise. Noise pass. Presence remains. The center stabilizes. Replacing fear with truth restores order without struggle. The mind returns to its rightful function. The heart relaxes. The body cooperates. Life flows. No battle is needed. Only direction. When truth is placed at the center, fear steps aside naturally, and what remains is clarity, steadiness, and the quiet confidence of alignment. Faith becomes real when it moves from thought into posture, not posture of the body, but posture of being. Practical faith is not what is believed in silence. It is how life is lived when circumstances offer no guarantees. It is living as one already protected, not because proof has arrived, but because truth has been accepted. Protection is not something that begins after danger appears. It is the nature of alignment. When awareness rests in truth, protection is already active. Practical faith does not wait for reassurance. It moves from certainty. It acts from the assumption that support is present now. Fear waits for evidence before relaxing. Faith relaxes first. This is the reversal that changes everything. The mind trained by fear insists on seeing before trusting. Practical faith trusts before seeing, and by doing so, allows seeing to occur. Living as one already protected does not mean ignoring facts. It means interpreting facts from a higher reference point. Circumstances are acknowledged without surrendering authority to them. Information is received without becoming identity. Action is taken without panic. Faith expressed only as affirmation remains incomplete. Faith expressed as behavior becomes embodied truth. How choices are made, how setbacks are met, how uncertainty is held. These reveal where faith actually lives. Practical faith does not dramatize danger. It does not rehearse disaster. It does not demand constant monitoring of outcomes. It trusts guidance to appear as needed. It trusts intelligence to operate without supervision. Protection is not fragility shielded from life. It is resilience grounded in reality. It is knowing that nothing essential can be harmed. When this knowing is active, the nervous system settles. The body stops preparing for attack. Energy returns to clarity. Faith in practice changes pace. Fear rushes. Faith allows timing. Fear pushes for immediate resolution. Faith moves deliberately. This shift in pace opens space for insight. Insight improves action. Living as one already protected also changes language. Inner speech softens. Words lose urgency. Catastrophic thinking loses credibility. Language becomes descriptive rather than predictive. The future is no longer narrated as threat. This posture of faith does not eliminate effort. It removes strain. Effort guided by clarity is efficient. Effort driven by fear is wasteful. Practical faith conserves energy by aligning action with truth. Protection is often imagined as something external, intervening at the last moment. Practical faith recognizes protection as the intelligence shaping decisions long before crisis. It appears as intuition, as restraint, as redirection, as timing. Living this way requires relinquishing the habit of constant checking for approval, checking for outcomes, checking for safety. These habits signal distrust. Faith releases them gradually. Trust grows through experience. Experience confirms alignment. When choices made from calm lead to coherence, confidence strengthens. Fear loses its claim. Faith becomes self-validating. Protection is recognized in hindsight and trusted in advance. Practical faith also reshapes relationships. Dependence shifts from people to principle. Expectations soften. Attachment loosens. Love becomes freer because safety no longer depends on another's behavior. This does not diminish connection. It purifies it. Relationships are no longer used as shields against fear. They become expressions of shared presence. Authenticity replaces strategy. Living as one already protected also affects work. Decisions arise from purpose rather than pressure. Risk is assessed without paralysis. Creativity increases because fear no longer narrows imagination. Protection does not guarantee success as defined by the world. It guarantees coherence. Coherence aligns inner and outer life. From coherence, outcomes become meaningful regardless of form. Faith in practice does not require heroic confidence. It requires consistency. Small acts of trust repeated daily reshape orientation. Choosing calm over panic. Choosing clarity over speculation. Choosing patience over control. Protection is felt as steadiness rather than excitement. It is quiet assurance. It does not fluctuate with circumstance. It remains present even when emotions rise. Emotions pass through it without displacing it. Living as one already protected also means releasing the need to defend identity. Criticism loses power. Approval loses urgency. Self-worth stabilizes because it is no longer negotiated externally. Fear thrives on conditional worth. Faith rests in inherent worth. When worth is inherent, protection feels natural. There is nothing to prove, nothing to secure. Practical faith trusts guidance in motion. It does not demand full maps. It accepts next steps. Each step reveals the next. This trust prevents stagnation. Movement continues without panic. Protection does not mean absence of challenge. It means challenges do not threaten essence. Challenges become information rather than verdicts. Learning replaces self-blame. Living this way also restores rest. Rest without guilt. Rest without vigilance. Rest as alignment. The body recovers when it is not treated as a frontline. Faith embodied becomes contagious. Calm influences environments. Stability affects others, not through persuasion, but through presence. Presence communicates safety more effectively than explanation. Protection is not maintained by vigilance. It is maintained by alignment. Alignment is renewed through attention. Attention returns to the present. The present reveals support. Practical faith does not deny fear's appearance. It denies fear authority. Fear may knock. It is not invited in. Truth occupies the home. This posture is learned through repetition. Each moment offers a choice. React as if unprotected or move as if held. The choice becomes easier as experience accumulates. Protection becomes obvious not through absence of difficulty, but through continuity of support. Support appears in unexpected forms, missed dangers, redirected paths, timely insights. Living as one already protected transforms the relationship with uncertainty. Uncertainty becomes space rather than threat. Space allows creativity. Creativity reveals solutions. Faith in practice simplifies life. Complexity often masks fear. Simplicity reflects trust. Decisions become cleaner. Priorities clarify. Protection is not a promise for tomorrow. It is a reality now. When lived now, tomorrow organizes itself. Settle into this posture. Move from certainty rather than seeking it. Allow actions to express trust. Let behavior declare alignment. Protection is already active. Living as if this is true allows it to be experienced. And as experience confirms truth, faith becomes natural. Fear steps aside. Life responds with coherence. Fear cannot remain where love is fully present. This is not sentiment. It is law. Perfect love casts out fear because fear is the experience of disconnection, and love is the recognition of unity. When unity is restored, fear has no function. Love here is not emotion. It is not attraction, affection, or approval. It is the fundamental intelligence that holds life together. It is the principle that sustains, orders, and gives continuity to existence. When this love is known as present reality, fear dissolves without resistance. Fear argues that something essential can be lost. Love reveals that nothing essential was ever separate. Fear insists on vulnerability. Love establishes wholeness. Fear isolates. Love unites. These states cannot coexist because they are built on opposite assumptions. Perfect love does not need to be created. It needs to be remembered. It has always been present, but it is often obscured by attention placed on appearances. When attention returns to essence, love is recognized as the ground of being. Fear depends on conditions. It asks what might happen if circumstances change. Love is unconditional. It does not fluctuate with outcomes. When love becomes the reference point, circumstances lose their power to threaten identity. The mind often confuses love with dependency. It believes love must be earned, maintained, or protected. This belief breeds fear. Perfect love does not negotiate. It does not withdraw. It does not test worth. It simply is. When awareness rests in this love, the nervous urgency of fear softens. The body relaxes because it no longer perceives danger as fundamental. The breath deepens. The heart steadies. These are signs of alignment, not effort. Fear demands control. Love allows trust. Control tightens perception. Trust opens it. When trust becomes natural, the imagination stops rehearsing loss. Attention returns to what is real and present. Perfect love casts out fear by restoring belonging. Belonging to life itself. Belonging to the source that animates every moment. This belonging is not granted. It is inherent. Remembering it changes everything. Fear claims that love can be lost. Perfect love reveals that love is the source of existence, not a possession within it. What is source cannot be lost. What is foundational cannot fail. This recognition transforms relationships. Others are no longer viewed as potential threats or guarantees of safety. They are seen as expressions of the same life. Connection becomes freer. Expectations loosen. Fear-driven attachment fades. Love does not eliminate boundaries. It clarifies them. Boundaries formed from love protect integrity without fear. Boundaries formed from fear isolate and defend. The difference is felt immediately. Fear often disguises itself as self-protection. Love exposes this disguise. Self-protection rooted in fear narrows life. Self-care rooted in love expands it. Expansion brings resilience. Perfect love also reorients purpose. Actions no longer aim to avoid loss. They aim to express truth. Motivation shifts from survival to expression. This shift reduces pressure and restores joy. Love does not promise that nothing painful will occur. It promises that pain does not define reality. Pain passes through love without corrupting it. Fear magnifies pain by predicting permanence. Love reveals transience. When love becomes the ground of perception, forgiveness arises naturally. Forgiveness is not excusing harm. It is releasing the belief that harm defines identity. Fear holds grievances as proof of danger. Love releases them as illusions. Fear feeds on comparison. Love dissolves comparison. When worth is inherent, comparison becomes irrelevant. Peace stabilizes because it no longer depends on relative position. Perfect love also transforms the relationship with uncertainty. Uncertainty is no longer interpreted as threat. It becomes openness. Openness invites guidance. Guidance replaces anxiety. Love is not passive. It is intelligent responsiveness. It listens. It adjusts. It acts without panic. Fear reacts. Love responds. Response is creative. Reaction is repetitive. The practice of love is not sentimental expression. It is disciplined attention. Attention to what is real. Attention to presence. Attention to unity. This attention nourishes love until it becomes the dominant state. Fear resists this practice because love dissolves its narratives. Narratives require separation. Love Collapse is distance. Distance sustains fear. Proximity dissolves it. Perfect love casts out fear by revealing sufficiency. Fear insists there is not enough time, not enough support, not enough safety. Love reveals sufficiency as the nature of reality. This sufficiency is quiet. It does not announce itself. It is felt as ease, as steadiness, as confidence without arrogance. This feeling becomes the new normal as awareness stabilizes. Love does not demand belief. It reveals itself through experience. When attention rests in presence, love is felt. When love is felt, fear retreats. The sequence is natural. Fear often returns when love is forgotten. Forgetfulness is not failure. It is habit. Habits dissolve through repetition of truth. Each return to love weakens fear's credibility. The mind may still produce fearful thoughts. Thoughts do not equal reality. Love does not argue with thoughts. It outgrows them. Thoughts lose influence when they are not believed. Perfect love does not fight fear. It renders it unnecessary. Fear exists to protect what is believed to be fragile. Love reveals nothing essential is fragile. As this revelation deepens, life feels safer without becoming smaller. Risk becomes meaningful rather than terrifying. Openness replaces defense. Curiosity replaces suspicion. Love is the antidote because love is the truth fear denies. When truth is restored, denial collapses. Fear has no anchor. Rest in this recognition. Love is not something to achieve. It is what remains when illusion fades. It is the foundation beneath every moment. Allow love to be the reference point. Let perception reorganize around it. As love stabilizes, fear dissolves naturally. Perfect love casts out fear because fear was never real in the presence of truth. And truth, once remembered, does not leave. Fear of the future is fear of absence. It is the belief that when tomorrow arrives, support will be missing. This fear does not arise from what is happening. It arises from leaving the present moment and imagining life without guidance. The future becomes frightening only when the present is abandoned. The future has no substance of its own. It is a mental projection shaped by memory and expectation. Fear gives it weight by filling it with images. Images of loss, failure, illness, and collapse. These images feel real because they borrow emotion. But emotion does not grant reality. It grants intensity. The future frightens because intensity is mistaken for truth. Power exists only in the present. Clarity exists only in the present. Guidance operates only in the present. When attention moves away from now, power is forfeited. Fear fills the vacuum created by that forfeiture. Returning attention to now restores power immediately. The present moment is not a waiting room for something better or worse. It is the place where life functions. Breath occurs here. Awareness occurs here. Intelligence operates here. When attention rests here, fear loses its environment. Fear requires imagined time. Presence removes it. Fear of the future often masquerades as responsibility. It claims that anticipating problems prevents harm. In reality, anticipation rooted in fear drains energy and narrows perception. It prepares the mind for threat, not for solution. Preparation grounded in presence looks different. It listens, it adapts, it responds when information actually arrives. The future feels overwhelming because it is imagined in total. The mind tries to carry everything at once. Presence reduces scale. Only the next step exists now. Only the next breath exists now. When scale reduces, fear weakens. Overwhelm dissolves into manageability. The belief behind future fear is this: when the moment arrives, support will not. This belief contradicts experience. Support has appeared repeatedly throughout life. It has appeared in different forms, often unexpectedly, often without prediction. The present has always carried what was needed. There is no evidence it will stop. Fear imagines a future without presence, but presence does not leave. Presence moves with awareness. When awareness arrives, presence arrives. This is the key. You do not need to secure the future. You need to stay present when it becomes now. The mind often attempts to solve future scenarios to feel safe. This creates endless loops because imagined scenarios multiply. Each solution generates another possibility. Presence ends the loop. It replaces speculation with perception. Returning to the present does not require force. It requires noticing. Noticing breath, noticing sensation, noticing the simple fact of being alive. These notices anchor attention. Anchored attention restores power. Power restored does not mean certainty restored. It means capacity restored. Capacity to respond. Capacity to choose. Capacity to listen. Fear wants certainty. Presence provides capability. Capability is sufficient. The future becomes frightening when identity is placed in outcomes, when worth depends on success, when safety depends on control. Presence relocates identity to awareness itself. Awareness is stable. Outcomes change. Stability returns. Fear of the future also arises from impatience, the desire to know everything now. Impatience is discomfort with not knowing. Presence accepts not knowing as neutral. Neutrality removes threat. The future is not hostile. It is unknown. Unknown is not dangerous by nature. It becomes dangerous when imagined without trust. Trust does not predict. Trust allows. Returning power to the present also restores timing. Fear rushes ahead. Presence honors sequence. Sequence allows unfolding. Unfolding reveals guidance at the appropriate moment. The present moment contains all necessary information for now. Anything beyond now is imagination. Imagination can serve creativity or fear. Presence determines which. Fear of the future tightens the body. Shoulders lift. Breath shortens. Muscles brace. These reactions signal loss of presence. Returning attention to sensation releases tension. The body recognizes safety faster than the mind. Presence also simplifies decision-making. Fear multiplies options. Presence clarifies priorities. When priorities are clear, action follows without panic. The future does not need to be controlled. It needs to be entrusted. Entrusting does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means releasing the burden of omniscience. No one was designed to know everything in advance. Returning power to the present restores humility. Humility recognizes limited perspective. It allows guidance to enter. Fear blocks guidance by insisting on self-sufficiency. The present moment is generous. It offers breath, perception, and choice. These are sufficient tools. The rest unfolds in response. Fear often predicts that the future will demand more than you can give. Presence reveals that capacity grows with demand. Growth occurs in sequence, not in anticipation. The future has never arrived all at once. It arrives as moments. Each moment carries its own support. This has always been true. Remembering this weakens fear. Returning power to the present also restores joy. Joy does not wait for outcomes. It arises from aliveness. Fear postpones joy. Presence allows it. The mind may continue to produce future-oriented thoughts. Thoughts are not commands. They are suggestions. Presence listens without obeying. Obedience returns only to what is real. Each time attention returns to now, fear loses credibility. The pattern weakens. Trust strengthens. The future feels lighter because it is no longer carried. The present moment does not promise ease. It promises reality. Reality is workable. Imagination fueled by fear is not. Rest attention here. Feel the ground. Feel breath. Feel existence happening without effort. This is where power lives. The future does not require defense. It requires presence. Presence meets the future as it arrives. Not before. As attention stabilizes, fear loosens. The mind quiets. Perspective widens. Confidence returns without bravado. Power belongs to the present because the present belongs to reality. When power is reclaimed here, fear of the future dissolves naturally. Nothing needs to be solved now except returning. Returning to presence. Returning to power. Returning to what is real. From this return, tomorrow can wait. When it arrives, it will arrive as now. And now has always been enough. Fear of failure and fear of success arise from the same mistaken belief. The belief that life depends entirely on personal effort, personal image, and personal outcome. When this belief takes root, every step feels dangerous. Movement becomes a risk. Stillness becomes paralysis. The mind oscillates between hiding and proving, between shrinking and striving. Both fears wear different masks, yet both speak the same lie. Fear of failure says that a mistake will expose unworthiness. It whispers that falling means being judged, rejected, or diminished. It ties value to performance and safety to perfection. Under this fear, action becomes heavy. Choices are delayed. Opportunities are avoided. Not because there is no ability, but because the cost of error feels unbearable. Fear of success speaks with a different voice, but it serves the same illusion. It suggests that rising will separate you from others, increase expectations, or demand a version of yourself that cannot be sustained. It warns that visibility invites pressure, that expansion invites loss, that receiving invites guilt. Under this fear, potential is restrained. Gifts are hidden. Growth is postponed. Both fears assume the same false premise, that you are alone at the center of the story, that outcomes define identity, that worth must be earned and defended. When life is seen through this lens, both failure and success become threats. One threatens the image of adequacy, the other threatens the comfort of familiarity. These fears do not arise because danger is real. They arise because identity has been misplaced. When identity is anchored in a small self defined by results, every result feels final. Every moment feels like a verdict. Fear intensifies because the stakes are imagined as absolute. Failure is feared because it is mistaken for condemnation. Success is feared because it is mistaken for isolation. Both are misunderstandings. Neither failure nor success has the power to define being. They are events. They are movements. They are information. They are not identity. Fear of failure often carries shame. Shame is the belief that something essential is wrong. It convinces the mind that error reveals truth about worth. In reality, error reveals process. It shows where adjustment is needed. It offers feedback, not judgment. Shame disappears when identity is no longer fused with outcome. Fear of success often carries guilt. Guilt suggests that expansion takes something from others, that shining is selfish, that receiving is unfair. This belief confuses growth with separation. Expansion does not diminish others. It expresses what already exists. When growth is aligned with service, guilt loses its foundation. Both fears collapse when responsibility is properly understood. Responsibility does not mean controlling results. It means showing up with integrity, acting from clarity, responding with sincerity. Results unfold beyond personal control. Holding responsibility for what cannot be controlled creates fear. The mind that fears failure believes life is an exam. One mistake means disqualification. The mind that fears success believes life is a burden. One rise means obligation without support. Both interpretations distort reality. Life is not an exam. It is not a burden. It is an unfolding expression. When action is driven by fear of failure, effort becomes rigid. Creativity narrows. Flexibility disappears. When action is blocked by fear of success, effort is withheld. Momentum stalls. Energy turns inward and stagnates. Both states drain vitality. Freedom emerges when action is reclaimed without attachment to outcome. Doing what is aligned without needing proof of safety. Expressing what is true without negotiating acceptance. This shift does not eliminate uncertainty. It removes threat from uncertainty. The fear of failure says that falling proves inadequacy. The truth is that falling proves movement. Stillness produces no errors because it produces nothing. Growth requires motion. Motion includes correction. Correction is not failure. It is intelligence in action. The fear of success says that rising creates distance. The truth is that alignment creates resonance. When expression is genuine, it attracts what belongs and releases what does not. Loss that follows authenticity is not punishment. It is clarification. Both fears depend on the illusion of self-ownership, the belief that you must manufacture your own value and defend it through performance. When value is recognized as inherent, fear loses leverage. There is nothing to protect, nothing to prove. The mind often tries to negotiate safety by staying small or by over-preparing. Both strategies reinforce fear. Safety does not come from control. It comes from alignment. Alignment allows support to appear where control cannot. Failure and success are not opposites. They are movements within a larger process. Both inform, both refine, both pass. When identity rests in awareness rather than outcome, neither can threaten. The fear of failure tightens the future into a narrow path. The fear of success narrows it in a different way. Presence widens perspective. It allows multiple outcomes without collapse. When fear says, "Do not try," it is not protecting. It is preserving the familiar. When fear says, "Do not rise," it is not being humble. It is avoiding expansion. Familiarity feels safe, but it does not nourish growth. Letting go of both fears requires surrendering the belief that life demands a fixed identity. Identity is fluid. Expression evolves. Being remains constant. When being is remembered, expression becomes free. Action taken without attachment feels lighter. Effort remains, but strain dissolves. There is care without tension, focus without obsession, commitment without fear. Fear dissolves when responsibility is redefined. Responsibility becomes faithfulness to truth rather than management of outcomes. Success becomes expression. Failure becomes information. Neither becomes a verdict. The world may still label outcomes. Labels do not need to be carried internally. Internal freedom does not require external agreement. Each time fear of failure appears, notice the belief beneath it. The belief that error equals unworthiness. Release that belief. Replace it with presence. Presence does not judge. Each time fear of success appears, notice the belief beneath it. The belief that expansion equals danger. Release that belief. Expansion guided by truth does not abandon support. Movement resumes naturally when fear no longer defines direction. Decisions become simpler, not because the path is clear, but because identity is stable. There is no need to choose between failing and succeeding. The choice is between living from fear or living from truth. Truth does not negotiate with outcomes. It expresses itself fully and allows life to respond. As this recognition settles, effort becomes cleaner, desire becomes quieter, motivation becomes intrinsic. Fear loses relevance. Neither falling nor rising can threaten what you are. They only reveal how life moves through you. When this is known, both fears lose their grip. What remains is willingness. Willingness to act, willingness to learn, willingness to receive. Without fear shaping direction, life unfolds with steadiness. From this steadiness, action continues, not to avoid failure, not to chase success, but to express what is real, and what is real does not fear expression. The world offers many forms of security, and all of them share the same weakness. They change. Titles, savings, contracts, routines, approval, and control promise stability. Yet each depends on conditions that can shift without warning. When security rests on what changes, the mind remains alert, defensive, and tense. Peace becomes temporary because it is borrowed from circumstances rather than grounded in truth. False security is not the presence of resources. It is the belief that resources are the source. When trust is placed in form, form becomes a god. The mind begins to monitor, protect, and fear loss. The more carefully it guards, the more anxious it becomes. Control increases, peace decreases. This is not failure of effort. It is the nature of misplaced trust. True trust does not reject the world. It refuses to worship it. Money, work, health, and relationships remain meaningful, but they no longer carry the burden of providing certainty. They become instruments rather than foundations. When the foundation shifts from form to principle, anxiety loosens. The soul rests because it is no longer negotiating safety with the temporary. False security trains attention outward. It watches markets, opinion, symptoms, schedules. It measures worth through numbers and reactions. True trust trains attention inward. It rests awareness in what does not fluctuate. This inward resting does not create passivity, it creates steadiness. From steadiness, action becomes clear. The promise of the world is conditional. If this holds, then you are safe. If that succeeds, then you are secure. Conditional promise require constant maintenance. They never allow rest. True trust is unconditional. It does not depend on favorable outcomes. It depends on alignment with what remains when outcomes change. When trust is placed in appearances, fear becomes logical. Appearances do not guarantee continuity. The mind prepares for loss because loss is possible. When trust is placed in principle, fear loses its justification. Principle does not fluctuate. It sustains expression even as expressions change. The illusion of false security lies in control. Control suggests mastery over uncertainty. In practice, it creates bondage. The mind becomes a manager of threats. Every unexpected event feels personal. True trust releases the need to manage life. It accepts guidance without surrendering intelligence. Intelligence functions best when it listens. True trust does not promise comfort. It promises support. Support is different. Comfort seeks ease. Support provides capacity. Capacity allows response. Response replaces panic. When identity is attached to possessions or roles, loss threatens identity. When identity rests in being, loss becomes transition. Transition can be navigated. Identity cannot be repaired if it is built on what passes. False security tightens the future. It plans defensively. It hoards. It braces. True trust opens the future. It allows unfolding. It prepares without panic. Preparation guided by trust is flexible. Preparation guided by fear is rigid. The world teaches that safety is earned. Earned safety is never secure. It can be revoked. True trust recognizes safety as inherent. Inherent safety cannot be taken. It can be forgotten, but not removed. When fear arises, the instinct is to add more layers of protection, more planning, more insurance, more control. These may have practical value, but they do not address the root. The root is orientation. Where attention rests determines whether peace is possible. True trust is not denial of risk. It is recognition of order beyond chaos. Risk exists in form. Order exists in principle. Aligning with order does not prevent events. It provides coherence within them. The mind often confuses vigilance with wisdom. Vigilance fueled by fear exhausts. Wisdom, rooted in trust, observes calmly. Calm observation allows timely action. Timely action reduces harm more effectively than anxious anticipation. False security isolates. It makes life a negotiation against threat. Relationships become transactions. Trust becomes conditional. True trust unites. It allows openness without naivety. Boundaries exist, but they are not built from fear. The world teaches that peace comes after stability is achieved. True trust reveals that stability emerges from peace. When peace is primary, stability follows where it can. Where it cannot, peace remains. The soul anchored in true trust does not collapse when structures change. It adapts. Adaptation is not loss. It is intelligence in motion. Rigidity breaks. Flexibility endures. False security depends on accumulation. More is required to feel safe. True trust depends on remembrance. Less effort is required as awareness deepens. The weight carried by the mind decreases. When trust is misplaced, gratitude disappears. Everything feels earned and therefore threatened. When trust is aligned, gratitude returns naturally. Gratitude stabilizes attention. Stabilized attention reduces fear. The world encourages comparison. Comparison fuels insecurity. True trust removes the need to measure. Measure is replaced by alignment. Alignment has no competitor. The body responds to true trust. Breath deepens. Muscles release. Sleep improves. These are not rewards. They are signs of coherence. Coherence restores function. False security promises protection through possession. True trust offers protection through presence. Presence cannot be stolen. It can only be neglected. Returning to presence restores trust instantly. True trust does not require proof. Proof belongs to the senses. Trust belongs to awareness. Awareness recognizes itself as sustained. This recognition quiets the demand for guarantees. Living from true trust does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means redefining it. Responsibility becomes faithfulness to truth rather than defense against loss. Decisions are made from clarity, not fear. As trust deepens, the world loses its authority to threaten. Events still occur, changes still arrive. The difference is internal. Reaction gives way to response. Panic gives way to steadiness. False security asks what must be controlled to feel safe. True trust asks what must be remembered to remain at peace. Peace is not the absence of movement. It is the absence of fear governing movement. The mind trained in true trust becomes resilient, not hardened, resilient. It bends without breaking. It recovers without resentment. It moves forward without carrying the past as a warning. When trust rests in what does not change, change loses its power to intimidate. The future no longer appears as a threat. It appears as an unfolding. This is the distinction that matters. Security borrowed from the world requires constant defense. Trust rooted in truth sustains itself. One exhausts, the other steadies. As this understanding settles, effort softens, vigilance relaxes, attention returns to what is real. From there, action continues without fear as its driver. True trust does not make life smaller. It makes it workable. And in that workability, peace becomes durable. Fear does not remain confined to thought. When it is sustained, it seeks expression. The body becomes the canvas upon which unresolved fear paints its message. This is not punishment. It is communication. The body speaks what the soul has carried silently. The body is not an enemy. It does not betray. It reflects. It responds faithfully to the state of consciousness that governs it. When fear becomes habitual, the body adapts to a posture of defense. Muscles tighten, breath shortens, systems shift into survival mode. Over time, this state imprints itself. What began as emotion becomes pattern. What became pattern becomes condition. Fear alters rhythm. It disrupts harmony. Harmony is health. When harmony is disturbed, disorder appears. Disease is not a moral failure. It is a signal that alignment has been lost. The signal is not meant to frighten. It is meant to redirect. The soul never intended to live in constant alert. Alertness is a temporary response, not a permanent residence. When fear becomes chronic, the body cannot return to rest. Rest is essential for renewal. Without it, systems exhaust. Exhaustion invites imbalance. Many physical conditions are rooted in prolonged inner tension. Fear of loss tightens the chest. Fear of rejection contracts the throat. Fear of survival burdens the digestive system. Fear of moving forward stiffens the spine. These are not rules. They are tendencies. The body expresses what the mind refuses to release. This understanding is not meant to create blame. Blame itself is another form of fear. It is meant to restore agency. What is created through sustained consciousness can be transformed through restored consciousness. Healing does not begin with fighting symptoms. Fighting reinforces conflict. Healing begins with listening. Listening without panic. Listening without judgment. The body does not demand fear. It invites attention. When fear governs the inner world, the body remains in preparation for danger that never arrives. Stress chemicals circulate continuously. Recovery systems are suppressed. Over time, this imbalance manifests physically. The body follows instruction. Fear is an instruction. The instruction can be changed. Fear dissolves not through denial, but through understanding. Understanding reveals that the danger was imagined, not present. As this realization settles, the body begins to respond. Breath deepens. Tension releases. Circulation improves. These changes are not miracles. They are returns to natural order. True healing addresses cause, not only effect. Treating the body while ignoring the inner state leaves the door open for repetition. Addressing the inner state allows the body to follow. This does not dismiss the value of medical care. Care and wisdom work together. The deepest healing occurs when external support is joined with internal realignment. The body responds best when the soul stops sending conflicting messages. Fear isolates. Healing reconnects. Reconnection restores flow. Flow restores function. When fear is replaced with trust, the body no longer needs to guard. Guarding consumes energy. Trust frees it. Energy once used for defense becomes available for repair. Illness often arrives after long periods of ignoring inner strain. The soul whispers before it shouts. When whispers are ignored, the body raises its voice. This is not cruelty. It is mercy. It interrupts unconscious patterns. Pain does not demand panic. It demands presence. Presence softens resistance. Resistance intensifies sensation. Presence allows information to surface without amplification. Fear tells the body that the world is unsafe. Trust tells the body that support exists. These messages produce different chemistry. Different chemistry produces different outcomes. The body heals best in an environment of safety. Safety is not the absence of symptoms. It is the absence of fear governing attention. When fear recedes, the body receives permission to rest. Rest is not inactivity. It is alignment. Alignment restores communication between systems. Communication restores balance. The body listens constantly. It listens to thoughts, emotions, expectations. When the message is threat, it prepares for threat. When the message is support, it allows recovery. Fear often hides beneath control. Control attempts to prevent vulnerability. The body cannot heal while controlled. Healing requires openness. Openness requires trust. Releasing fear does not mean ignoring reality. It means responding to reality without magnifying it through imagination. Imagination, fueled by fear, creates tension. Imagination guided by truth creates coherence. The body is designed to heal. This is its default. Healing is interrupted by sustained stress, not by lack of ability. Ability remains intact. It waits for conditions to change. Changing conditions begins internally. Attention shifts from threat to presence. Presence communicates safety. Safety allows regulation. Many symptoms ease when the inner battle ends. The body stops fighting when the mind stops fighting itself. Fear of illness often worsens illness. Fear adds a second burden. The first burden is physical. The second is emotional. Removing the second lightens the whole system. Healing accelerates when compassion replaces fear. Compassion toward the body restores trust. Trust allows cooperation. Cooperation restores balance. The body does not need to be fixed. It needs to be supported. Support begins with listening rather than resisting. Fear fragments attention. Healing integrates. Integration brings wholeness. Wholeness is health. When fear is released, the body may still require time. Time is not failure. Time is process. Process unfolds when obstruction is removed. The soul behind disease seeks remembrance. Remembrance restores order. Order expresses as vitality. The body responds to truth even when the mind doubts. Gentle consistency communicates more powerfully than forceful effort. As fear loosens, symptoms may shift. This is movement. Movement is life. Stillness born of suppression is not healing. Stillness born of peace is. The invitation is simple. Listen. Soften. Release the story of danger. Allow presence to inform the body. The body knows how to follow when fear no longer leads. Healing is not a battle to win. It is a return to coherence. Coherence restores rhythm. Rhythm restores life. Fear leaves when it is no longer believed. The body reflects this belief immediately, not always completely, always meaningfully. As trust replaces fear, the body receives new instruction. Repair resumes. Balance returns. This is not wishful thinking. It is alignment. Alignment does not force outcomes. It removes obstacles. When the soul rests, the body follows. When fear ends, healing begins. Fear survives in noise. It feeds on repetition, stimulation, and the constant movement of thought. When the mind is crowded, fear finds endless places to hide. Inner silence removes its shelter. Silence does not attack fear, it starves it. The subconscious is shaped by what is repeatedly impressed upon it. Words, image, emotional tones, and unspoken assumptions sink below the surface and continue operating without permission. Much of what governs behavior was never consciously chosen. It was absorbed. Inner silence creates the space where these patterns can be seen and changed. The subconscious does not reason. It records. It accepts what is frequent and emotionally charged as truth. When fear dominates inner dialogue, the subconscious treats fear as instruction. It adjusts posture, expectation, and reaction accordingly. Silence interrupts this process. It pauses the recording. Silence is not emptiness. It is awareness without commentary. In that awareness, unconscious material rises naturally, not to overwhelm, but to be released. What remains hidden controls. What is seen can be transformed. Reprogramming does not require struggle. Struggle reinforces resistance. The subconscious responds to clarity, consistency, and calm authority. Silence establishes authority. It signals safety. Safety allows change. When inner noise subsides, the mind returns to its natural state. The natural state is receptive, not defensive. Receptivity allows new patterns to replace old ones without force. Fear-based patterns persist because they are familiar. Familiarity feels safe even when it harms. Silence introduces unfamiliar peace. At first, this peace may feel unsettling. The mind accustomed to noise resists stillness. Persistence softens resistance. The first encounter with silence often reveals restlessness. Thoughts demand attention. Memories surface. Emotions arise. This is not failure. It is exposure. Exposure allows release. Each return to silence weakens automatic reactions. The subconscious begins to receive new input. Calm replaces urgency. Trust replaces vigilance. These impressions sink deeply because they are felt, not argued. Affirmations gain power when born from silence. Words spoken from noise are weak. Words arising from stillness carry authority. The subconscious recognizes the difference. It responds to conviction, not volume. Reprogramming is not about erasing the past. It is about changing the present signal. The subconscious updates based on current input. When the present consistently communicates safety, old alarms deactivate. Fear often arrives as inherited memory. Warnings absorbed early. Tensions learned through observation. Silence loosens their grip. It removes the emotional charge that sustains them. Inner silence also restores discernment. Not every thought deserves attention. Silence teaches the difference between signal and noise. This discernment protects the subconscious from further distortion. The mind cannot be forced into silence. Force creates tension. Silence appears when resistance drops. Resistance drops when trust increases. Trust grows through gentle repetition. Silence is entered through attention to what is simple. Breath, sensation, presence. These anchors return awareness to now. Now is safe. The subconscious learns through experience, not explanation. As silence deepens, thought slows. Space appears between thoughts. In that space, identity shifts. You are no longer the thought. You are the witness. This shift weakens fear immediately. Fear depends on identification. Silence breaks identification. Without identification, fear loses authority. It becomes information, not command. Reprogramming accelerates when silence is paired with intentional thought. Silence clears the field. Intentional thought plants new seeds. These seeds grow because the soil is receptive. Consistency matters more than intensity. Brief, regular silence imprints more deeply than occasional prolonged effort. The subconscious responds to rhythm. When silence becomes familiar, the body responds, breath deepens, muscles soften, nervous system regulation improves. These changes reinforce new patterns. The body becomes an ally. The mind trained in silence reacts less. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. Choice restores freedom. Freedom dissolves fear. Silence also dissolves inherited urgency. The belief that something must be done immediately or disaster will follow. Silence reveals that most urgency is imagined. Imagined urgency fuels fear. The subconscious learns from silence that nothing collapses when thought stops. This realization is transformative. The fear of letting go dissolves. As noise decreases, intuition strengthens. Intuition guides without anxiety. Guidance replaces guessing. Guessing feeds fear. Silence is not withdrawal from life. It is preparation for clarity. From silence, action becomes precise. Precision reduces error. Reduced error builds confidence. Reprogramming through silence is gentle but profound. Old patterns fade without confrontation. New patterns establish without struggle. The subconscious stops replaying the past when the present is compelling. Silence makes the present compelling. It fills awareness fully. Fear loses momentum when it is no longer reinforced. Silence removes reinforcement. Repetition of silence completes the process. Over time, silence ceases to be a practice. It becomes a state. This state remains even during activity. Activity no longer disturbs it. The mind becomes quieter without effort. Thoughts arise and pass. Fear no longer anchors. Reprogramming completes when trust replaces vigilance as the default. Trust feels lighter. The system recognizes this. Silence does not need explanation. Its effect is evident. Peace increases. Reactivity decreases. Clarity remains. Inner silence restores the original pattern. Awareness centered. Subconscious aligned. Fear absent. From this state, life is engaged without distortion. Perception is clear. Response is grounded. Silence has done its work. The subconscious has learned a new truth. Safety is not conditional. Presence is enough. Fear no longer governs because silence has rewritten the inner language. What remains is stillness in motion. And from that stillness, freedom operates naturally. Fearless consciousness is not the absence of emotion. It is the absence of false authority. Fear may still pass through awareness, but it no longer governs. It no longer decides. It no longer defines identity. What defines life now is certainty, not certainty about outcomes, but certainty about ground. The ground is love. This consciousness emerges gradually. It is not forced into existence by willpower. It ripens through repeated alignment. Each return to presence weakens fear. Each act of trust strengthens clarity. Over time, the inner center stabilizes. The mind learns where to rest. Fearless consciousness is anchored in recognition. Recognition that love is not something to earn. It is something to remember. It has always been present. When this is remembered, effort softens. Vigilance relaxes. The need to protect dissolves. Love here is not sentiment. It is principle. It is coherence. It is the organizing intelligence that sustains life. When consciousness aligns with this principle, fear becomes unnecessary. There is nothing to defend against what supports existence itself. The fearless state does not promise comfort. It promises stability. Stability does not prevent challenge. It allows response without collapse. Response without collapse is freedom. Fear once demanded constant explanation. Why this happened? What might happen next? Who is responsible? Love does not demand explanation. It allows understanding to unfold naturally. This removes pressure from the mind. In fearless consciousness, identity is no longer negotiated with circumstances. Approval does not grant worth. Disapproval does not remove it. Success does not inflate. Failure does not diminish. Life is engaged fully without emotional bargaining. This state does not detach from the world. It participates more clearly. Engagement becomes cleaner. Motivation becomes intrinsic. Action flows from alignment rather than from avoidance or proving. Fearless consciousness rests in trust. Trust does not mean passivity. It means cooperation with intelligence greater than personal effort. Cooperation replaces struggle. Struggle dissolves. Love becomes the reference point. Decisions are filtered through coherence rather than through anxiety. This simplifies life. Complexity fueled by fear disappears. What remains is clarity. In this state, the future loses its threat. The past loses its grip. Attention stays with what is real. Real does not require defense. Fearless consciousness recognizes that pain may occur, but suffering is optional. Suffering arises from resistance. Resistance dissolves when love governs interpretation. Pain passes. Love remains. This consciousness does not seek to eliminate fear. It outgrows it. Fear becomes irrelevant rather than defeated. Irrelevance is the true end of fear. Love stabilizes perception. What once appeared hostile reveals neutrality or opportunity. What once felt overwhelming becomes workable. Workable is enough. Fearless living does not require constant affirmation. It expresses itself through tone, pace, and presence. Others feel it without explanation. This is influence without effort. The body reflects this shift. Breath deepens. Posture opens. Energy circulates. These are signs of alignment. Alignment restores vitality. Fearless consciousness is resilient. It bends without breaking. It adapts without losing center. Change no longer threatens identity. Identity is not built on form. This state welcomes silence. Silence is not emptiness. It is fullness without noise. From silence, action arises naturally. Action does not disturb peace. Love here is not selective. It does not depend on conditions. It is not withdrawn when challenged. It is constant. Constancy dissolves fear. When love governs, boundaries remain intact. Boundaries are no longer defenses. They are expressions of clarity. Clarity does not fear contact. Fearless consciousness allows vulnerability without collapse. Vulnerability becomes openness. Openness allows connection. Connection reinforces trust. The mind no longer scans for threat. Attention turns outward with curiosity rather than suspicion. Curiosity expands perception. Expanded perception reduces fear. In this state, forgiveness becomes natural, not as moral duty, but as release. Holding grievance requires fear. Release restores freedom. Love reorganizes priorities. What matters clarifies. What does not fades. Energy is conserved. Focus strengthens. Fearless consciousness is not naive. It sees clearly. Clarity includes risk without magnifying it. Risk is navigated with intelligence rather than anxiety. This way of living does not promise constant happiness. It promises steadiness. Steadiness supports joy when joy appears. It supports sorrow when sorrow passes. The inner narrative changes. Instead of asking how to avoid pain, the question becomes how to remain aligned. Alignment answers everything else. Fearless consciousness recognizes that love is not a reaction. It is a state. States shape experience more than events. When love is the state, fear cannot anchor. It may appear briefly. It does not stay. There is no place for it to settle. This consciousness trusts without needing proof. Proof belongs to the senses. Trust belongs to awareness. Awareness knows itself as supported. Living from this certainty changes interaction. Words soften. Timing improves. Listening deepens. These changes ripple outward naturally. The world responds differently to fearless consciousness, not because the world changes, but because perception changes. Changed perception reveals different options. Fearless living is not heroic. It is natural. It is the default state remembered. Remembering ends the effort. Love does not compete with fear. It replaces it. Replacement is complete. Fear fades without ceremony. In this state, rest becomes available. Rest is not escape. It is restoration. Restoration sustains life. Fearless consciousness does not chase meaning. Meaning reveals itself through presence. Presence is enough. This is not the end of life's movement. It is the end of fear governing movement. Movement continues freely. Living in the certainty of love does not remove challenges. It removes threat from challenges. This changes everything. The mind no longer asks how to survive. It knows it is sustained. From that knowing, Life unfolds with ease. What remains is simple: presence, trust, love. This is fearless consciousness, not built, remembered. From here, living continues, not guarded, not rushed, not defended, steady, open, free. Love holds, fear ends,